Chapter 301. Pei Chi lived her life like a machine. She was so busy that she forgot about herself and her pain. It was already 10 p.m. when she came back, which was considered quite early. Just as the car was about to stop, her cell phone rang. It was Tang Yu's exclusive ringtone. She stopped in a hurry and bumped into the black limousine that was turning in front of her. When she came back to her senses, she was in a daze again. It was a black Maybach that looked familiar. Pei Chi's heart was beating fast because that car belonged to Tang Yu. And she and Tang Yu had even done it in the back seat of that car. The two cars touched each other intimately, and there was an ear-piercing scratching sound. When Pei Chi saw the chauffeur getting out of the car, she hurriedly opened the door and got out. Tang Yu's chauffeur had wanted to reprimand little Shimei for driving like this. But when he saw Pei Chi, he was stunned. It was actually Miss Pei. "Uncle Zhao," Pei Chi called out. The chauffeur replied awkwardly and bent down to whisper to the open window, "Sir, it's Miss Pei." Tang Yu was sitting in the car. From Pei Chi's perspective, he looked very charming. "Drive the car away first. Don't wait for me," Tang Yu said as he opened the door and got out of the car. When she saw him, Pei Chi could barely move her feet. She stared at him in the deep winter night. He was wearing a formal three-piece suit with a gray coat on the outside. His figure was slender and elegant. Pei Chi carefully looked at herself again. She was dressed like a little bear, and she pursed her little mouth. A few snowflakes drifted down from the sky, giving the scene an even more desolate sense of beauty. Uncle Zhao's heart skipped a beat. He did not dare to stay any longer and quickly drove the car away. After the car drove away, Tang Yu looked at Pei Chi's car. "When did you learn to drive?" 3 months ago. "It's been open for a month now," she confessed honestly. Tang Yu pursed his lips and walked towards the elevator. "Let's go up." Pei Chi was stunned. She parked the car and locked it before walking to the elevator. They stood side by side, very close, but no one spoke. He didn't say anything, and she didn't dare to. Ever since she ran away from the wedding, things had changed between them. He hadn't appeared for 3 months. In fact, she didn't understand why he still wanted to keep her. If it was to warm the bed, a grown man with such a strong desire wouldn't be able to endure for 3 months. When they got off the elevator, he leaned sideways and watched her open the door. Probably because he was by her side, Pei Chi tried a few times but failed to open it. Her fingers were trembling. In the end, Tang Yu held her hand and helped her open the door. As soon as they were in the room, he did not wait a moment, but embraced her and kissed her. Her body was folded in his arms. At that moment, both of them felt a long-lost satisfaction, but it was only limited to their bodies. The bag in Pei Chi's hand fell to the ground, but no one cared about it. As they kissed, he stumbled into the bedroom. Before he could remove all his clothes, he made love to her at the foot of the bed. She had known about love for a long time, and this time, she had been single for 3 months. Hence, she was especially gentle and did not push herself. Initially, he was holding back, but later on, he seemed to be unable to control himself and did it to the fullest. It was not until 1 o'clock that he finally let her go. Pei Chi couldn't remember how many times they had done it. She lay there for a long time. When she was a little drowsy, she heard him whispering in her ear, "Drive me home." Chapter 302. Pei Chi slowly opened her eyes and saw him standing neatly by the bed. He had already put away all of the intense stares he had just given her. She was the only one lying here in such a sorry state. After a long time, she moved slightly. She wanted to continue sleeping, but she didn't have the right to act coquettishly with him. She walked into the changing room with the bedsheet wrapped around her and changed into a set of clothes. When she came out, Tang Yu was already at the bar outside with a glass of red wine in his hand. She was in a daze for a moment. If she wasn't dressed neatly, she would have thought that they had returned to the past. Pei Chi pursed her lips and felt a little sour inside. The past? How could they have returned to the past? "Let's go." She looked at him. Tang Yu looked down and finished the wine in the glass in one gulp. He walked straight towards her. There was still no sound in the elevator. It was so quiet that it was a little strange and scary. It had only been a few dozen seconds, but it felt as long as a lifetime. When they reached the parking lot downstairs, she opened the back seat door for him. However, Tang Yu didn't get in and just said calmly, "I'll sit in the front passenger seat." Pei Chi was a little surprised. He had already walked over and sat in the car first. She bit her lip and followed him in. She had just sat down when she heard his voice. "Go to the Rose Garden on Fuli Road." Pei Chi knew about that place. It was the best villa district in City B. There were more than 10 villas in total. Each villa covered 100 acres, and a single villa was sold for about 7 to 800 million yuan. She was stunned for a moment and started the car. Because Tang Yu was in the car, she seemed a little flustered. She was usually very agile, but she was a little helpless at this moment. When the car turned, it scraped a pillar on the side. Tang Yu looked at her sideways. "You can get on the road like this?" Pei Chi reversed the car a little, and her little face was a little tense. "I used to drive quite well." Tang Yu didn't say anything else. He leaned against the seat and closed his eyes to rest. Since he didn't say anything and didn't look at her, she calmed down a lot. After reversing the car, she confirmed with him again. "Do you want Uncle Zhao to come and pick you up?" His eyes were still closed, and his voice was low. "Why?" She didn't say anything. Was there a need to ask for the reason? His life was very valuable, and she wasn't in a good state tonight. If something happened, she wouldn't be able to pay for it. Just as she was feeling a little uneasy, Tang Yu slowly opened his eyes and looked at her. His voice was faint. "Pei Chi, if something happens, it's good that we die together." Her heart was beating a little fast, and she didn't dare to respond. If she did, she would be consigned to eternal damnation. When she started the car again, she felt much calmer. In the quiet night, the white car drove steadily on the road. It was moving forward as if it was driving towards the sky. The lights on the roadside flashed by, but it seemed like it would never end. "Pei Chi, are you willing to continue driving like this?" Tang Yu suddenly asked. Pei Chi looked in his direction and found that he had already opened his eyes and was looking at her with a burning gaze. She pursed her lips and turned her head away immediately, her heart racing uncontrollably once more. At this moment, a car in front of them made a slanted turn, and Pei Chi didn't notice it for a moment. And she was a newbie. Seeing that they were about to collide, Tang Yu's fingers were on the steering wheel. He held onto her fingers and spun a half circle at lightning speed. Chapter 303. Why? In the dark, his voice was particularly hoarse. "What?" Pei Chi's heart was beating a little fast as she turned her head to look at him. It was very dark in the car, so she could not see his face clearly. She only felt that his eyes were particularly deep. Occasionally, the lights from the cars outside would shine in, leaving a deep shadow on his handsome face. He said in a hoarse voice, "When two cars are about to collide, the driver's instinct is to turn the front passenger seat to protect himself." He unbuckled his seatbelt, and when she was unprepared, he had already leaned in close to her. "Pei Chi, but you neglected this instinct just now. Perhaps your instinct is to protect me. Is that so?" His voice was really hoarse, and it was right next to her delicate ear. Pei Chi's breathing was erratic, and her chest was heaving up and down. "Is that so?" Tang Yu's voice sounded a little strict. She finally turned her face and accidentally brushed against his face. Their eyes were very close to each other, as though they could see the depths of each other's souls. "No." She closed her eyes and whispered weakly. His gaze scanned her expression, and he spat out a few words coldly, "Liar." After saying that, he kissed her. This kiss was very hot, and he did not hold back at all. It was as though he was so angry that he wanted to burn her to ashes. Pei Chi's body was tightly pressed against the back of the seat, and she did not dare to move. She was so small that there was almost no air in her lungs. Her little hands gripped the seats on both sides, and her fingernails had turned white. Suddenly, he let go of her and returned to his seat. His voice also returned to its usual cold tone. "Continue driving." Pei Chi's hands and feet were all tied up. She felt a little embarrassed and calmed down for a while before continuing on the road. When they reached the rose garden, it was already an hour later. Tang Yu got out of the car. Seeing that she was still sitting in the car, he said calmly, "Get out of the car." Pei Chi was a little dazed and suddenly woke up. I want to go back. He stood in the dark, quietly watching her. Pei Chi reached out to open the car door and got out. When she slowly walked towards him, the lights in the entire rose garden lit up like it was daytime. Under the lights, the European-style mansion was luxurious to the extreme. It was the kind of fairy tale castle that every girl dreamed of owning. There was a meadow in front of the castle, and in the middle of it was a huge fountain. At this moment, the fountain was spraying beautiful water. It was extremely dazzling in the dark night. And on both sides of the grass, there were roses in the dark night, floating with a faint fragrance in the dark night. There were actually roses in this kind of weather, and they were large patches of black roses. Tang Yu stood there, gazing at her in the midst of the glory. Pei Chi, I might be going on a blind date, he said calmly. She felt a stabbing pain in her heart, and her throat felt like it was blocked. After a long time, she softly said, Congratulations. Tang Yu narrowed his eyes and said coldly, If I decide to get engaged, I will end this relationship with you. He might not be able to give that girl love, but he could be loyal to her. Even so, he still wasn't willing to let go of Pei Chi. She looked up. The light reflected in her eyes, as if there were countless little stars hidden in them, and they were dazzling. Chapter 304. Tang Yu stared into her eyes, and his voice was still cold. Really? It's really good for you, right? Pei Chi looked into his eyes. Tang Yu, this is the best outcome. He pursed his lips tightly and didn't say a word. He just stared at her. Tonight, he had done it with her and kissed her. But now, she was telling him that it was the best outcome for him to go on a blind date with another woman. After a long while, he said lightly, You should go back. Initially, he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. As he walked towards the main residence, his heart felt cold. Pei Chi stood there in the winter night. Her breath turned into a white mist. She looked at his back view and his black coat. She wanted to look at him a few more times. In the future, he would belong to someone else. She couldn't look at him like this anymore. She wouldn't even be able to hug him secretly or respond to him sneakily. Tang Yu walked up the stairs and suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked at Pei Chi. My birthday is on the 16th of this month. There will be a banquet that night. Her body trembled as she understood what he meant. The banquet was fake, but the concubine selection was real. There would be so many beautiful girls for him to choose from. She didn't say a word and only smiled lightly. Tang Yu, you don't know that I'm already very happy to be able to come here tonight. I've seen your feelings for me. Even if it was in the past, even if this love can't last forever, I will still protect your love for me. Her eyes were very bright. Tang Yu looked at her for a long time before he walked into the main residence. The transparent glass door closed with a click. It separated them into two different worlds. Pei Chi suddenly felt very cold when she couldn't see him, but she couldn't bear to leave just like that. She wanted to stay a little longer. Now that there was no mistress here, she could still secretly imagine that this place still belonged to her. Just like Tang Yu, he was still hers. She hugged herself with her arms and slowly opened them. She raised her head slightly and closed her eyes. She could feel the sounds of the flowers blooming, the little insects chirping among the grass, and the fragrance of the grass. All of this was too wonderful. She had already experienced it in this life. She didn't come from a good family, and Tang Yu had compensated for it. He gave her a unique love. Her lips curled up slightly as she thought wickedly that perhaps Tang Yu would never love anyone as much as he loved her. He would never call someone his baby, and he would never feed that girl personally. Even though his entire body belonged to someone else, she had the complete version of him. She was enough. She slowly opened her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Pei Chi, you will wake up from your dreams. Once was enough for such a beautiful dream. She looked up at the villa in front of her and said softly, Tang Yu, I'm returning your stable life to you. I'm sorry. Also, I love you. She walked towards the door. With every step she took, she walked out of his life. With every step she took, it was because she loved him. In front of the French window on the second floor, Tang Yu stood and watched her leave indifferently. He slowly drank the wine in the glass and closed his eyes. He really wanted to kill her. Seeing her was more painful than not seeing her. So, he gave her a deadline. Pei Chi-Chi, if you're not willing to come to my side, if you only have Jinrong in your heart. I used to naively think that if I married Tangyu one day, I would take good care of you, just like my own cousin. She held his hand. Even though you're 2 years older than me, am I naive? She said it with a smile, but as she smiled, she started to cry. Jinrong, I was too greedy. I really thought that one day, I could also get blessings and marry Tangyu. Can you get better? Get better, and try your best to be happy for me. Find a good girl, just like Tangyu, and be happy forever. She held his hand, her tears wetting Lin Jinrong's palm. It was wet and warm. His palm moved a little, however. Pei Chi-Chi did not notice it. She closed her eyes. Jinrong, if that's the case, why don't I be the one that day? She spoke to him the whole night, but Lin Jinrong was still lying there with a pale face. Tangyu found her. Tangyu. The better he treated her, the more she didn't dare to respond, and the more she didn't dare to be with him. But now, she just wanted to see him, even if it was just a glance. She twisted her leg and almost fell into the muddy water. She managed to steady herself with great difficulty, but her hamstring was probably injured. Even the slightest movement was painful. Finally, Pei Chi-Chi looked up and saw that GM Hotel was right in front of her. At this time, it was already 12 o'clock, the time when Cinderella revealed her true form. Bearing with the pain, she limped to the door. The courtyard was cold and deserted. There was no one there. Chapter 307. Perhaps he had already found the right person, the right girl to marry. Pei Chi-Chi chuckled softly. She stood in the rain and looked at the sky above the hotel. Her feet hurt. She could have stood to stop a taxi, but she didn't. That night, Pei Chi-Chi walked in the rain. Perhaps as she walked, the blood on her body would be washed away, and she wouldn't be Zhao Ke's child anymore. Her feet hurt so much that she lost all feeling in them. Late at night, the people around her looked at her strangely, but Pei Chi-Chi didn't care. She just wanted to keep walking like this. Pei Chi-Chi, if we were to keep walking like this, would you be willing? He had said this before. If they were to keep walking like this, she would be willing. If the truth didn't surface, she would be willing. She would continue walking with him. She would keep walking, even if she didn't do anything. She walked in the rain all night. Her body was burning hot, and her feet were almost deformed from walking. But she couldn't feel the heat anymore. The sky was getting brighter, and the rain had stopped. Her clothes were dried by her body temperature, and the corners of her mouth were very dry, as if they were going to crack. She didn't sleep for the whole night. Walking like this made her feel as if her body had been hollowed out. When she returned to Xia City, she felt as if a lifetime had passed. She opened and closed the door, and her back was against the door. But immediately, her body stiffened. Tangyu was actually there. He was sitting on the sofa, dressed in a black suit. His noble appearance didn't diminish at all. His gaze fell on her little face, and his tone was indifferent. You went to see Jinrong? His voice was very soft, but she could already hear the hair all over her body standing on end. He looked at her disheveled appearance and remembered that he had called Jinrong's sanatorium. The people there said that Pei Chi-Chi had been there. I called you all night. Tangyu got up and patted the creases on his clothes. It seems that I don't need to worry about you. With that, he smiled and said in an indifferent tone, Pei Chi-Chi, you're free now. Free now? Her little face was frozen, almost unresponsive. These few days, these few months, everything she did was to make him hate her. Even when she went to the hospital last night, even though she knew that he would find out, she still went. She did not go to his birthday party, but went to see Jinrong. Wasn't all of this just for him to let go? But when he said the words "you're free," even though she was prepared, she was still in so much pain that she felt like she had lost her breath. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on his face, unable to look away. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to look at it again after this. Her hand hurt. The small box was embedded in her palm, hidden in her sleeve. His feet hurt so much that he couldn't take another step. She could only stare at him, watching as he spoke of his disgust towards her. Tang Yu finally hated her. Hating is better than loving, better than hating that way. He would not be in pain, and he would not think about her. She couldn't say a word. She just bit her lips to prevent herself from fainting. She tried her best to tell herself that this was the best ending. She looked at him, and her eyes were blinded by a touch of heat. Perhaps this was the last time she could look at him like this. Tang Yu paused and looked around. You can continue to stay here. I will get Qing City to handle the transfer. Chapter 308. There's no need for that, Pei Chi said quickly. Under his sharp gaze, she lowered her eyes and said, I'll find a place to stay. Tang Yu said non-committally, That's good too. Just pass the keys to Xiao Ran after you're done moving. I'll send it over. Pei Chi looked up at him. After a long while, she said softly, Thank you for taking care of me, Mr. Tang. She bent down to him, and her eyes were burning with passion. She held back the tears in her eyes and told herself, Pei Chi, don't cry. This is a good result. He didn't speak ill of you, scold you, or chase you away. He's so good to you. He's still the Tang Yu that you once loved. He's so wonderful. This was the compensation from God, but she couldn't be so selfish. She straightened her body and looked at Tang Yu. He still looked indifferent, and she couldn't tell what he was feeling. He said slowly, There's no need to thank me. Everything started with a deal, so it's only natural that it ends. He walked past her and walked towards the door. When he passed by her, he didn't look at her again. Pei Chi was crushed into pieces at that moment. She clenched her fists tightly and tried not to pull him back. Tang Yu put his finger on the door and said softly, Pei Chi, you gave up your last chance. There was no woman at the birthday party. After it ended, he waited for her here. But she didn't come back that night. She went to see Jinrong. In her heart, Jinrong was still the most important. After Tang Yu said that, he walked straight out. He didn't look at her, nor did he notice that Pei Chi was so weak that she almost collapsed. When the door closed, she just stood there with her eyes closed. At this moment, her world had collapsed. Even with her eyes closed, she could imagine the sound of her heart breaking. Breaking. Bit by bit, it broke down along the seam, never to be mended again. She wanted to speak, but only a hoarse voice came out of her throat. She raised her hand and put it down again. There was only his breath in the air, but he was gone. Perhaps he would never come again. It was over. It was over. The flower fell. She saw a 12-inch cake on the dining table, very delicate. She slowly sat down and reached out to light the candles. There were 26 of them. Looking at the firelight, she said softly, Tang Yu, happy birthday. Pei Chi ate the whole cake mechanically. Even if she wanted to vomit, she still ate with all her might. Tears streamed down her face as she ate. Her body was burning hot, but she didn't care. Because the heart is dead. She ate too much, so her stomach went haywire and she was sent to the hospital. During the 2 days she was in the hospital, Pei Chi just lay there and looked outside. She was a little envious because there were 2 birds singing happily outside from time to time. Little One had come over to take care of her. For the first time, she scolded Pei Qian. Boss Pei, how can you eat so much cake? Fortunately, we discovered it in time. If we were too late, the consequences would have been dire. Pei Chi retracted her gaze and smiled faintly. It was an accident. Little Win's eyes widened. Who was he trying to fool? How could he not be careful about such things? How many accidents would there be in this world? However, she knew in her heart that this had something to do with Mr. Tang. Little One, show me the documents. Pei Chi looked at Little One. Chapter 309. Pei Chi smiled. I'm much better. The doctor said that I can be discharged the day after tomorrow. Then go to the office the day after tomorrow, Little One said fiercely without any hesitation. Pei Chi coughed softly. Gao Ziwen, I'm now. Before she could finish, Little One interrupted her. Forget it. Don't be like Boss Pei. If you want to show off, do it in the company. Now, you're in the hospital. In front of me, you're just a sick kid. You have to listen to me. Pei Chi was speechless. She sighed and lay down again. Little One smiled. That's right. Come, cover yourself with the blanket. Be good. When she said the last word, Pei Chi-Chi's eyes became hot because she thought of Tang Yu. Tang Yu used to coax her like this. Thank you, little one, Pei Chi-Chi said sincerely. Little one peeled an apple at the side. What are you thanking me for? I'm not getting paid. Let me tell you, Pei Chi-Chi, I'm doing field work these 2 days. Don't try to exploit me like a capitalist. Even Pei Chi-Chi was amused by her. She touched her chin and thought about it seriously. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have thought of it. You haven't been working these 2 days. Little one looked like she was going to kill a capitalist. However, Pei Chi-Chi's smile disappeared immediately. What was she doing just now? She seemed to have touched her chin. This was Tang Yu's favorite action. Pei Chi-Chi had read in a book that when a person loved another person very much, they would unconsciously imitate him. Was she doing the same now? Her hand reached out again and touched her chin lightly. Then, she chuckled softly. Little one looked at Pei Chi-Chi's smile and was a little dazed. She saw love in Boss Pei's eyes. That moment of brilliance was indescribably beautiful. Boss Pei, I think you've turned me gay, little one said pitifully. Pei Chi-Chi looked up. Little one, how are you gay? Little one was momentarily speechless. Can you have a sense of humor? Don't act so mature. You're a girl, so you should be cuter. Mature at a young age. Pei Chi-Chi felt that Xiaowen's summary was quite good. If there was a person who lost everything in a few months, she would also mature. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips. Little one, I want to rest. She lay down and closed her eyes. That frail appearance caused Xiaowen's heart to ache. After Xiaowen left quietly, Pei Chi-Chi opened her eyes. It had been 3 days. What was he doing now? As soon as Pei Chi-Chi was discharged from the hospital, she went to Xia City to move. She asked Little One to help her find a small 2-bedroom apartment. The location was not bad, and the environment was not bad. She rented it first. Her belongings were all in Xia City. Her car was parked downstairs, and she went up by herself. Actually, she did not have many things. When she moved here from Qingshui Road in the past, she only had 1 box. She did not plan to take the clothes that Tang Yu bought for her with her. Pei Chi-Chi packed up in less than half an hour. She carefully put away the crystal box that Pei Mingyi gave her and closed the box. Then, she stood up and looked around. She had lived here for almost half a year. Too many things had happened during this period. She had loved and lost. However, everything had to end eventually. Chapter 310. Her fingers caressed there gently, as if he was still there. As if he was still leaning there with a magazine in his hand. He lifted his leg gently. Pei Chi-Chi, have you gained weight recently? The corners of her lips curved up slightly. No, I've lost weight. She felt extremely blissful just lying there. But she would not allow herself to have this little bit of happiness. She moved over slowly, kissed his pillow, and carried him away. Yes, she did not want anything but the pillow that Tang Yu had slept on before. She had developed a habit that she could only sleep on his pillow. Pei Chi-Chi hugged the pillow as if it was a treasure and carried the suitcase. When she locked the door, she lowered her eyes and felt a little warm. When she looked up again, she took a deep look at the unit number and committed it to memory. After putting her things in the car, she drove to the apartment that Xiaowen had helped her find. The apartment had been cleaned up and some soft decorations had been added. The colors were mainly beige and green, and it looked very comfortable. She especially liked the small balcony in the bedroom. Sitting there, she could see the building of Shengyuan Corporation, especially at night. The words Shengyuan Corporation were very eye-catching. She tidied up her things and placed the pillow at the head of the bed, next to the original pillow. She stood up straight and smiled at him. After that, it was the keys. She thought about it and decided to call for delivery. After writing down Xiao Ran's contact number, she passed the envelope with the keys to the delivery man. This was a complete break. It was a week later when Tang Yu received the keys. He had been on a business trip for 10 days. On the day he broke up with Pei Chi-Chi, he went to Province C. After returning to the company, he spent the whole morning dealing with the piling up of work. When it was almost noon, Xiao Ran walked in with a package in his hand. This is a package from Miss Pei. After putting the package on Tang Yu's desk, Xiao Ran did not leave immediately. Tang Yu knew what was inside, so he asked as he opened it, "What's the matter?" Xiao Ran hesitated for a moment. Based on the current relationship between the president and Pei Chi-Chi, she wasn't sure if she should bring this up. However, she still liked Chi-Chi. She thought about it and said, "Miss Pei fell sick a few days ago." "Yes, I know about this." Tang Yu's voice was indifferent. Annie Chen called me after she knew about it. He had an indescribable feeling in his heart as he held his phone. Xiao Ran was stunned. Only then did he understand that the president and Chi-Chi were probably really unlikely. Chi-Chi was sick, but the CEO didn't seem to have any reaction. Xiao Ran didn't know what else to say, so he forced a smile. "Then I'll go out first." After she left, Tang Yu was not in the mood to work. He was the one who suggested the breakup. It was his pride. Maybe it shouldn't be called a breakup, but a termination of labor relationship, he thought self-deprecatingly. Whether she was good or bad, he shouldn't disturb her anymore. So be it. He put the envelope in the drawer. He wasn't going to return to Xia City. However, when he got off work, he still drove his car to that place without any prior notice. The place had been completely cleaned up. His and her things had been moved away, and there was almost no trace of life there. Tang Yu walked in, opened the closet, and saw the clothes he had bought for her. None of them were taken away. He slowly walked to the bedroom. The bed sheets had already been removed. On the huge bed, there was only a single pillow core, all alone. Chapter 311. Auntie Chun heard his words and was a little surprised. "A pillow? I think there was only one when I came over the other day." Would anyone go out of their way to get a pillow? Tang Yu didn't say anything more. He hung up the phone and looked at the pillow on the bed. He picked it up and sniffed it. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression was a little surprised and thought-provoking. He put down the pillow and made a call to Meng Qingqing. "Don't deal with Xia City anymore. Just leave it. Annie Chen can clean it regularly. Also, don't throw away anything inside. Don't take a single thing." When Meng Qingqing received this strange call, he only felt that Tang Yu was also strange. Didn't he just detoxify the poison in the chicken soup? Now he was acting strange again? Before he could ask clearly, Tang Yu had already hung up the phone. He didn't stay here for long and left quickly. Now he mostly lived in the Rose Garden. Later on, he and Pei Chi-Chi lived in the same city. They didn't meet each other. At first, he wasn't used to it, but as time passed, he slowly got used to it. He was waiting for the girl who took his pillow. This time, he wanted her to walk back by herself. This time, he wouldn't be soft-hearted to her. It was almost the end of the year, and Old Master Lin's health wasn't too good. In order to make the Old Master happy, Shang Yuan Fangya was especially lively this year. Meng Qingqing single-handedly organized it, trying to find some programs to make Lin Jinan happy. But no matter how good the program was, it couldn't compare to a granddaughter-in-law. Among the red and green flowers, Tang Yu held the hand of an elegant and refined girl. Her name was Sun Feifei, and she came from a good family. She studied piano and had a good temper. Tang Yu chose her as the female partner for the opening dance, which was a tacit approval of the old master's arrangement. Lin Jinan was really happy, and his complexion was much better. He kept praising Lin Yun, who was beside him, that this girl was beautiful. Lin Yun just smiled and didn't speak, while Tang Ziyuan and Zhao Ku listened on the side. No matter how beautiful she is, she's not as beautiful as that girl named Pei Chi-Chi. Even Tang Ziyuan sighed. Zhao Ku didn't say anything. She just stared at Tang Ziyuan. She knew what he was thinking. With Pei Chi-Chi's appearance, even a man would take a second look at her, let alone Tang Ziyuan, who was passionate. Actually, Zhao Ku didn't want to come today. She couldn't avoid meeting Lin Yun on occasions like this. Zhao Ku wasn't afraid of meeting Lin Yun, but she didn't dare to be too arrogant in front of Grandpa Lin. She stayed by Tang Ziyuan's side obediently. At this moment, Zhao Yi gracefully walked in front of Lin Yun, smiling as he said something. Lin Yun lightly smiled and placed her hand on his. Zhao Ku's eyes glanced at Lin Yun from time to time. She snorted in her heart. Not only did Zhao Ku see it, but Tang Ziyuan also saw it. The one who felt the most uncomfortable was Tang Ziyuan. He looked at his ex-wife in the arms of another man. Zhao Yi's eyes were brighter than a 220V light bulb. Tang Ziyuan wanted to vomit when he saw Zhao Yi's expression. Moreover, they were dancing. But why were they hugging her so tightly? Was there a need to place them on her waist? He didn't even know what it felt like to hug that small waist. Tang Ziyuan had never forgotten about Lin Yun. He remembered one time when he was drunk and drove to Lin Yun's place in the middle of the night. When he touched her, the long-lost passion came. That night, he actually felt that Lin Yun was even more beautiful and moving than Zhao Ku. He grabbed her and kissed her and succeeded. Lin Yun let him kiss her for about a minute, then gave him a slap without hesitation. Chapter 312. Tang Ziyuan narrowed his eyes, which could almost burn 2 holes in Zhao Yi's hands. And his jealousy naturally did not escape Zhao Ke's eyes. She sneered. What? You don't feel comfortable seeing your Yun Yun being held in someone else's arms? I don't know what you're talking about. Tang Ziyuan adjusted his clothes, looked away, and fell on Tang Yu and the girl named Sun Feifei. He did not like Pei Qi before, but in contrast, he seemed to dislike Sun Feifei even more. He said that she was like a wooden beauty. Was Tang Yu sure that he wanted to marry her and sleep with a piece of wood every night? Zhao Ku followed his gaze, and her eyes became a little deep. She knew that Pei Qi and Tang Yu were finished. Tang Yu's move was equivalent to directly announcing his future partner. Sun Feifei's life was really good, Zhao Ku thought very unhappily. But she would rather it be Sun Feifei, or any other woman, than Pei Qi. After the song ended, Tang Yu and Sun Feifei did not dance again. He politely sent her back to her original place. Tang Yu. Sun Feifei was a well-known pianist in China, and she was used to such occasions. But she really did not expect that among so many girls tonight, Tang Yu would choose her. Now, there was unconsciously affection between her eyebrows. For tonight, she deliberately wore a white dress. Although it did not look revealing, it was particularly designed to highlight the advantage of her figure. She believed that Tang Yu would notice it. Tang Yu did not notice it. He just very casually chose a girl who was not similar to Pei Qi at all. As for her appearance, her clothes, and even her figure, he did not look carefully, nor did he fantasize. He nodded slightly. I will contact you. My secretary will call you. Sun Feifei wanted to ask why he did not do it himself, but thinking of his identity, she felt that everything was so reasonable. Yes, the kind of noble, dignified, British marriage was what she had always wanted. She understood that as Mrs. Tang, she had to give the other party some personal space. If Sun Feifei had seen the interaction between Tang Yu and Pei Qi, she would have thought that this kind of aristocratic marriage was a ghost. Tang Yu quickly left and returned to Old Master Lin's side. The old man's fingers were holding onto his walking stick as his gaze landed on his daughter, Lin Yun. His old eyes were not blind. Just now, he had seen Zhao Yi's unruly little movements. However, he was a man, so what was the point of being so disciplined? He quite admired this kid, but Yun Yun didn't seem to accept it. She didn't want to jump just now, but she was held up by that kid Zhao Yi. Of course, the old master was very observant and naturally saw that Tang Yun was about to vomit blood. He sneered in his heart. His daughter was well-educated, well-mannered, talented, and beautiful, but in Tang Ziyuan's eyes, she was not even comparable to a broken shoe. It wasn't that he didn't know about Zhao Ke's past, it was just that he was too lazy to talk about it. Moreover, Lin Yun had no intention of getting back together, so he didn't interfere. Now it seemed that Tang Ziyuan was most likely regretting it. However, in this world, how could there be so much medicine for regret to take? Tang Yu stood beside him, and the old man snorted lightly. Why don't you spend more time with Miss Sun? What happened to you being so lovey-dovey with that ghost? Chapter 313. Tang Yu smiled. I will. Grandpa Lin mumbled and pointed in Lin Yun's direction. Don't you have any thoughts about your mother? Tang Yu felt helpless and said in a low voice, Grandpa, I'm the younger generation. This kind of thing should be decided by Mother herself. Grandpa Lin looked at him. You're not thinking about reuniting with your parents, are you? Why would I? I'm not Tang Xin. Tang Yu said and looked around but didn't see Tang Xin. Old Master Lin sighed. This couple is a little disgusting, but that last Tang Exine has quite the affinity with me. It was a pity that she was born with that kind of illness. It was really pitiful. What made Grandpa Lin look down on Zhao Ku even more was that Zhao Ku didn't take good care of Tang Exine when she was sick at such a young age. Instead, she socialized outside all day, as if she was afraid that others wouldn't know that she was Mrs. Tang. Stingy. Grandpa Lin didn't like her, and naturally didn't want to talk to her. Zhao Ku had done something bad to Lin Yun and always thought that Grandpa Lin knew about it, so she was even more afraid of him. After the song, Lin Yun finally got rid of Zhao Yi. She didn't hate him. On the contrary, Zhao Yi was an upright person and treated her very well. But recently, she was more and more afraid of being with him because her heart would be in a mess. All these years, she had long gotten used to a peaceful life. She didn't want to be disturbed by a man. Besides, she was already so old. If she caused any more trouble, people would laugh at her. She found an excuse to go to the washroom. Although Zhao Yi knew what she was thinking, he couldn't force her. There were so many people watching. No matter how reluctant he was, he had to let go. Lin Yun went to the washroom upstairs and splashed some cold water on her face to cool it down. She looked up at the mirror and her face was a little red. She quickly hid her eyes. At that moment, there was an indescribable charm. Tang Ziyuan leaned against the washroom door and said mockingly, "I didn't expect to see eye to eye with Zhao Yi at this age." Lin Yun's body stiffened. She looked up at the person in the mirror and slowly straightened her body. She put away the expression on her face and turned into the same indifference she always had when facing him. "Mr. Tang Ziyuan, are you talking to me?" Tang Ziyuan snorted. "How can I know the old when there's a new person? You know you're the old person too? Then you shouldn't have said what you just said." Lin Yun wasn't going to be polite with him. She didn't want to be entangled with him, so she wiped her hands and left. Tang Ziyuan blocked her way. There was a pained look on his face. "Yun, will you be with him?" Lin Yun looked at him with determination. "Tang Ziyuan, if you try to stop me again, I'm sure I will." Hearing this, he moved away in embarrassment. However, he still said unwillingly, "For you to be like this, does it mean that I still have a place in your heart?" Lin Yun thought that he was bored. "Tang Dun, I remember that you brought Mrs. Tang here." Her words seemed to have touched Tang Ziyuan's sensitive spot. His fingers suddenly grabbed her arm. Yun, I can get a divorce. Let's get married again." Lin Yun was surprised. She didn't expect Tang Ziyuan to say that. Actually, it wasn't just Lin Yun. Tang Ziyuan was stunned too, but he didn't regret saying it. He had been thinking about her all these years, and he missed her a lot. Chapter 314. Lin Yun wasn't as young and beautiful as Zhao Ku, but her temperament and talent were incomparable to Zhao Ku's. When Tang Ziyuan was with Zhao Ku, he often didn't know what to say. Zhao Ku would take the initiative to talk about jewelry or fashion. Only now did he feel that his old wife was the best. Now that he had spoken, he stared at Lin Yun with a burning gaze. The corner of Lin Yun's mouth twitched. She gently broke away from Tang Ziyuan. "You're probably drunk." "No, I'm very sober." Yun, I can't be more sober. I've never been more sober than I am now. I want to be with you. All these years, you're the only one in my heart." Tang Ziyuan looked at her sincerely and said with sincerity. Lin Yun regretted it. She should have continued dancing with Zhao Yi. Although she would have been taught, it was better than this situation. Just when she didn't know what to do, a sharp voice rang out. It was Zhao Ku. "Tang Ziyuan, you bastard." Zhao Ku's heart was bleeding. What did she hear? She heard her husband's betrayal. In the past, although she knew that he had Lin Yun in his heart and would call Yun in his sleep, she would never openly express anything to Lin Yun. Now, did he have the intention to divorce his wife and remarry his old wife? Zhao Ku pounced over and punched Tang Ziyuan's chest. She didn't care about her image, and she wasn't afraid of others seeing it. At this moment, she just wanted to ruin Lin Yun's reputation. Tang Ziyuan was her man now. If he hooked up with Lin Yun, it was obvious that Lin Yun was indiscreet. While Zhao Ku was making a scene, she also wanted to give Tang Ziyuan some pressure. If he still cared about his reputation, he wouldn't dare to do anything with Lin Yun anymore. Zhao Ku knew that for Tang Ziyuan to say this, it wasn't just for today. So, she wanted to take him down in one fell swoop and make him give up on this idea so that he wouldn't dare to do it again. But this was the difference between Zhao Ku and Lin Yun. In Zhao Ku's heart, she would always put herself first, while Lin Yun cared about the overall situation. Of course, Zhao Ku didn't know that Lin Yun's heart was dead. Why would she want to get back together with Tang Ziyuan? Seeing this, Lin Yun couldn't help but look at Tang Ziyuan sympathetically. However, she felt that he was reaping what he sowed, so she wanted to leave quietly. However, Zhao Ku stopped her and said sternly, "Lin Yun, tell me clearly today, what happened between you and Tang Ziyuan?" Obviously, she had offended the wrong person. Although Lin Yun had given Tang Ziyuan to someone else, it was because she had given up on Tang Ziyuan that she let him go. Tang Ziyuan didn't know that she was pregnant at the time. Lin Yun found out and wanted to tell him on their wedding anniversary. But the day before that, Zhao Ku came to her with a big belly. How ironic. After he sowed seeds on Zhao Ku, he actually got himself pregnant. At that time, Lin Yun had lost all hope. Later, she had a miscarriage and didn't tell Tang Ziyuan about it. At that time, he was very busy. He was so busy that he didn't have time to go home to deal with the scandal that Zhao Ku couldn't suppress. But when he came home, he only begged her to let go and let him and Zhao Ku be together. Lin Yun sat alone in the bedroom, and she asked him to stand outside, just like that for one night. After opening the door, she told him that she agreed to the divorce. From the beginning to the end, he didn't know that the child that had been lost before it was born. She helped him, letting him live with a murderer and watching him love that woman. This wasn't her punishment for herself, but for Tang Ziyuan. Chapter 315. Lin Yun's smile made her exude charm. Her demeanor wasn't something any slut could compare to. "Zhao Ku, Tang Ziyuan and I. Do you think I can still be with him after losing a child? You're looking down on me." Zhao Ku's face paled. She hadn't expected Lin Yun to say this. She had always thought that a proud woman like Lin Yun wouldn't open her mouth and that the child would rot in her womb. Tang Ziyuan's face was livid. Yun, what child?" Lin Yun was still smiling, but there were a few tears in her eyes. "When you and Zhao Ku had Tang Xian, I was pregnant with a child too. Zhao Ku accidentally pushed me backwards." "What's wrong, Ziyuan? Didn't Zhao Ku tell you?" Tang Ziyuan's heart was as cold as ice. Lin Yun had been cold to him all these years. He thought it was because of Zhao Ku, but now he knew it was because they had a child too. Child? If he had known that Yun was pregnant, would he still have insisted on a divorce? Tang Ziyuan was a little confused, but the only thing he was sure of was that he hated Zhao Ku. Accidentally? How could it be an accident? He knew her too well. Tang Ziyuan's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Zhao Ku. "You're so evil." Zhao Ku's lips trembled. She didn't know what to do. After a while, she suddenly screamed, "Ziyuan, how could you believe her? How could I do such a thing?" "I believe you." Tang Ziyuan had been married to her for more than 10 years. He knew what kind of person Zhao Ku was. He was sorrowful. The woman he had doted on for so long, sleeping by his side every night, had killed their child. The anger in Tang Ziyuan's heart rose to the limit. He stared at her and said, "Zhao Ku, what did you say to me at that time? You said that you loved me. Without me, you would die in pain. You would rather die with the child in your belly." Zhao Ku's lips moved. Before she could say anything, Tang Ziyuan roared, "Is this how you love me?" Everyone was shocked. The banquet quieted down and everyone looked towards the second floor. Was that Tang Ziyuan's voice? At this moment, Zhao Ku's sobbing voice rang out. It was especially piercing in the silence. "I got rid of her child because I love you." Then, there was a loud smack. Half of Zhao Ku's face was swollen. When she came back to her senses, she realized what she had just said. Tang Ziyuan's expression was particularly cold. "You bitch." Lin Yun wasn't interested in watching the dog-eat-dog scene anymore. She slowly walked to the staircase and said to the crowd, "It's just a family matter for Mr. Tang. Please continue." The music started again, and there was jubilation. As for the couple upstairs, they almost wanted to tear each other apart. Tang Yu walked over to Lin Yun. "Mom, are you all right?" Lin Yun looked calm on the surface, but in reality, she was still a little upset. She smiled faintly. It's nothing. It's just that the knot in my heart for so many years has finally been untied today. It wasn't that he wouldn't take revenge for any matter or grudge, it was just that it wasn't the best time to do so. Tang Yu patted the back of his mother's hand. Actually, he had also heard the conversation upstairs. Back then, he had seen Lin Yun lying there weakly in the hospital, and so much blood. Chapter 316. This was a taboo for Lin Yun. He hadn't mentioned it all these years, but he always remembered that he should have had a sister. After a long time, Tang Yu felt that Pei Chi-Chi was the compensation. Zhao Ku had killed his mother's child, but God had given Chi-Chi to him. At this moment, Lin Yun felt a little comforted. She lifted her eyes and looked upstairs with a faint smile. After this incident, Tang Ziyuan and Zhao Ku would completely disappear from her life. After the banquet, Tang Yu personally sent Sun Feifei back. He drove the Bugatti Veyron that he always drove, his eyes focused on the road ahead. Sun Feifei sat next to him, a little nervous. After all, this was their first date. She pressed her fingers against her skirt, afraid that he would think she wasn't dignified. For a long time, Tang Yu didn't say a word. So Sun Feifei said softly, "Let's go up and have a cup of coffee later. It's getting late." Tang Yu smiled. Next time. She was a little disappointed, but she didn't dare say anything. The Sun family's teachings were to be obedient. Especially for a man like Tang Yu, she didn't need family teachings. She would be obedient in front of him. Such a man could make women soften too easily. His coldness was also extremely charming. Sun Feifei was a little flattered. She still couldn't believe that the lucky one was her. She nodded and sat down even more obediently. Tang Yu looked ahead, and his mood was as cold as the night. There was nothing good about Sun Feifei. There was nothing that he liked, but there was nothing bad about her either. Perhaps this was called making do. As long as it wasn't that person, the little guy who was as beautiful as an oil painting and looked fierce at times, then it could be considered making do. The woman looked at his expression. She was shy at first, but then she couldn't smile anymore. She almost wanted to cry, because Tang Yu's eyes were getting colder and colder. This wasn't love, and it couldn't even be considered liking. When the car stopped, she asked softly, "Tang Yu, do you hate me?" His slender fingers were still on the steering wheel, and his gaze was deep as he looked ahead. "No, but you don't like me either, right?" Sun Feifei's voice became smaller. His gaze finally landed on her face, and he smiled. "I'll try my best." If it was an ordinary man, the girl would have turned around and walked away after hearing such words. Those with a bad temper would have slapped her in the face. But this person was Tang Yu. Sun Feifei was flattered when he said that. At least, Sun Feifei was a little touched. She sat there for a long time, feeling reluctant to leave. Tang Yu, on the other hand, was still sitting upright. He didn't ask her to leave, but his expression was indifferent. Finally, she felt that it was inappropriate to continue sitting like this, so she moved. Then, good night. Tang Yu nodded. The servants of the Sun family came to pick up their little princess. Sun Feifei stood there like a lady. She waited for Tang Yu's car to drive away before she walked into the main residence. Tang Yu sat in the car, looked at the rearview mirror, and pursed his thin lips. He really didn't hate Sun Feifei, but liking her should be very difficult. She was no different from the ladies he had met in the past. She wouldn't make his heart move. She wasn't like that cruel little thing. Thinking of that cruel little thing, Tang Yu stepped on the accelerator, and the white sports car shot out like an arrow. He didn't go back to the Rose Garden. Instead, he drove to Xia City and sat in the car. Chapter 317. The moment Pei Chi-Chi arrived at the office, everyone looked at her with a strange gaze. She glanced at Xiao Wan, walked into her office, and sat down. "Is there anything special this morning?" "No." Xiao Wan shook her head with a strange expression on her face. "Really?" Pei Chi-Chi coughed softly. "Xiao Wan, you look like you didn't get any red packets." Xiao Wan touched her face. "Did I? I'm very happy today, very happy." Pei Chi-Chi smiled. It's almost the new year. The company's welfare and other things should be almost ready. Are there any problems with the financial side? Xiaowen nodded. There's no problem. The company's situation has been quite good recently. Boss Pei, everyone is willing to believe in you now. Moreover, ever since Zhou Meilin went to jail, no shareholders wanted to withdraw their shares. That's for now. They have a mouthful of meat to eat. Pei Chi wasn't that optimistic. Xiaowen knew it in her heart and didn't say anything else. Pei Chi flipped through today's newspaper and asked curiously, "Where's today's financial section?" "Ah, there's nothing?" Xiaowen leaned over to help search. "There's nothing. I might have missed it. I'll look for it later." Pei Chi didn't say anything else. As the new year was approaching, there weren't many things to do. She got off work at 3 in the afternoon. She drove to a flower shop to buy a bouquet of daisies. When she came out, she saw a newspaper stand. Pei Chi stood for a while and finally walked over. She picked up a newspaper and paid for it. She returned to the car with the flowers and the newspaper. After putting down the things, she flipped through the financial section of the newspaper. Then, her expression froze. It was a headline of Shengyuan Academy. Tang Yu and a young girl were hugging and dancing. The girl was very beautiful and looked like she had been brought up well. The photo was very clear. Tang Yu's eyes were focused on the girl with his fingers on her waist. Pei Chi just looked at it and smiled bitterly. He said that he would go on a blind date. She had experienced this kind of method before. It was a kind of declaration, a kind of recognition. Slowly closing the newspaper, Pei Chi closed his eyes and calmed down for a long time. When they arrived at the cemetery, it was almost dusk. The sky darkened early, and they could already see a hint of twilight. The new grave and the untrodden road made it look even more desolate. Pei Chi slowly knelt down and gently placed the daisy in front of the grave. She sat on the cold cement and looked at Pei Mingyi's smiling face in the photo. She softly said, "Dad, I'm here." The face was still smiling, but it could no longer respond to her. Pei Chi's fingers slowly brushed away the dust on his face. She murmured, "Dad, it's almost New Year. Is your place quiet? Do you blame me for sending Auntie to prison? But if Auntie doesn't go to jail, Jinrong is innocent." Pei Chi closed her eyes. "Dad, I don't dare to see you. I'm afraid you'll be angry." She rested her head on the tombstone. It seemed like she was much closer to him. In the end, I didn't have happiness. Her Tang Yu had broken up. He would marry another woman. Pei Chi didn't say anything. She just held the tombstone and cried. Chapter 318. But now, no one could hug her like this anymore. No matter how painful it was all her. She could only bear it alone. "Dad, I will take care of the Pei Corporation and our home." Pei Chi sat and looked at the dusk. The cemetery was a little creepy in the evening, but she was not afraid at all because Pei Mingyi was there. With her dad here, Chi was not afraid. "Dad, I miss you. If you were here, I wouldn't feel so bad. I wouldn't feel like crying all the time, and I wouldn't be sleepless every night." She had never understood why her dad could not forget Zhao Ke. Now she knew that if she liked someone and loved someone, it would be unforgettable for the rest of her life. She didn't go home until the sky turned dark. She opened the windows when she drove, but it was still very cold. The lights were just turned on, casting a shadow on the winter night. She and Tang Yu had walked that brightly lit road countless times, but it was especially quiet today. It would be New Year's Eve in a few days, and there were children setting off small fireworks in the residential area. Pei Chi looked at them all the way, and for some reason, her eyes felt a little warm. She heard Tang Yu's voice. "Pei Chi, if you get pregnant, we will get married. Pei Chi, let's have more children. Pei Chi, when we have children, you will be the elder, and she will be the younger. They will all be babies for the first time." She regretted it. If she got pregnant back then, would she be able to stay by his side no matter what happened? Would she not want him to leave, no matter how hard it was? The white shime stopped slowly, and Pei Chi opened the door and got out. She stood on the street in the middle of winter, watching those children set off fireworks. She was a little envious, because Pei Chi didn't have a home now. It was almost New Year's Eve, and she had no one to celebrate with her. No one to stay up late with her. No one to have a reunion dinner with her. No one to hug her and say, "Our Chi-Chi is 1 year older." She stood there, watching those children, and didn't feel cold at all. A child saw her and ran over. "Sister, do you want to play with us?" Just as she finished speaking, she asked cautiously, "Why is big sister crying?" "No, the wind is too strong." Pei Chi-Chi smiled. She took a small firework from the little girl's hand and lit it up. When the fireworks were lit, in the midst of the flames, she saw warmth and hope. It was as though she had returned to the past. It was just like when she was young. She always felt that she wouldn't get beaten up tomorrow and that her auntie would like her. She would be like Pei Huan, a little princess. Pei Chi-Chi's eyes curved slightly as she smiled faintly. The little girl ran over and took another stick and lit it with her. Pei Chi-Chi didn't notice a black limousine slowly passing by at this time. The car slowed down and the window rolled down. Tang Yu and Sun Feifei were sitting inside. Sun Feifei was the one who opened the window. She sounded a little excited. "Tang Yu, look, there are so many children setting off fireworks. Should we go down and take a look?" There was a banquet that night, and Tang Yu and Sun Feifei went together. There was still time, so it was okay to satisfy a little girl's wish. However, when the window rolled down, not only Tang Yu, but Sun Feifei also wanted to bite their own tongues, because Pei Chi-Chi was there too. Chapter 319. She stood there, wearing a white coat, which was particularly eye-catching. It was so eye-catching that Sun Feifei wanted to close the car window, but she did not dare to. Tang Yu also saw it. He was a little shocked, and then he saw her car parked by the side. When the car slowly drove past, he saw Pei Chi-Chi's smiling face. Her eyes were curved, and her smile was very sweet. She was as happy as a little girl. His face became a little cold. It seemed that she was living a good life. Sun Feifei saw that his expression was strange. When she was about to close the car window, Pei Chi-Chi turned her head around. In an instant, they looked into each other's eyes in such a strong night wind. Her white dress and black hair made her look so beautiful that she could be eternally beautiful when she turned around. The car slowly drove past, and the driver in the front was already driving at the slowest speed, just like a slow-motion scene in a movie. Tang Yu's eyes were locked on her, and Pei Chi-Chi could not move her eyes away. She saw him and the beautiful woman beside him. At that moment, Pei Chi-Chi felt that the world was empty, and something was disappearing from her body. She saw Sun Feifei whispering something in his ear, and then the car window slowly closed. What she was facing was just a layer of black glass. She stood there blankly until she felt a sharp pain in her hand. The fireworks hurt her fingers, leaving a few black marks, and it was burning hot. She reflexively threw away the fireworks in her hand, but her eyes were still fixed on the car in the distance. She said to herself, "Pei Chi-Chi, from now on, he belongs to someone else. He will no longer hug you, call you baby, and treat the wound on your hand because you are the most important person. Pei Chi-Chi, you have completely lost him, lost Tang Yu." Her hand was still in great pain, but she did not care about it. She just stood in the cold winter night, looking at the lights in the distance. Her hand was still in great pain, but she did not care. She just stood in the cold winter night and looked at the bright lights in the distance. A few children were in the distance, and the little girl said softly, "Why is the sister crying?" A few children were in the distance. The little girl's voice was soft. "Why is that big sister crying?" Crying? Was she crying? Pei Chi-Chi raised her hand and wiped her face, only to feel a burning pain in her palm. He opened his palm and saw the wound on it. She was stunned for a moment and looked at him silently for a while before walking to her car. He gripped the steering wheel and felt a sharp pain in his palm. He could no longer drive the car. She could only get out of the car, take out her bag, and hail a taxi. After waiting for a long time for her to speak, the driver coughed softly. "Miss, where are we going?" Pei Chi-Chi looked at her palm. "Let's go to the hospital, the nearest hospital." The driver drove to the nearest Eastern hospital and arrived in less than 20 minutes. Pei Chi-Chi took the money from her wallet with one hand and thanked him in a low voice. At this time, The hospital had already closed for the day, and there were only emergency cases. She registered a number and waited in the corridor. There were about a dozen patients in front of her, all of whom had colds, headaches, and fever. There were elderly people and young couples, all of whom were snuggling up to each other, especially a few young couples who were particularly affectionate. On the other hand, Pei Chi seemed especially lonely when she stood by herself. A young man glanced at her, which made his girlfriend pinch him hard. The young man said something to make his girlfriend happy again. Chapter 320. After waiting for about half an hour, it was finally her turn. The doctor checked her hand and asked with his sensitive nose, "Did you play with fireworks?" She replied, "Yes. These days, there are always children brought here by their parents. They are all injured from playing with fireworks. One even hurt his eye. But you are the first adult." The doctor said with a straight face, "Luckily it's your left hand. Otherwise, you won't be able to take care of yourself." Pei Chi couldn't help but ask, "It's just a small injury. Why can't you take care of yourself? You need to use your hand to eat and go to the toilet, right?" The doctor did not continue, "So you should be glad. Prescribe some medicine and apply it for a week. Don't touch water for a week. It'll be troublesome if it gets infected." Before Pei Chi could say anything, the doctor flashed his white teeth again. "Then you need an injection and an foredrip. I heard that young girls are afraid of that." Damn it. She had to accept the doctor's threat just to see a doctor. Pei Chi took the prescription and didn't leave. The doctor laughed. He knew this young girl. Actually, he didn't really know her. He had heard that the girlfriend of the president of Shengyuan was especially afraid of injections. Every time she got an injection, Mr. Tang would carry her as if she was his daughter. And photos of Pei Chi and Tang Yu were often published in the newspapers. So, he recognized her immediately. Now, the young girl's face changed after being scared. The doctor thought to himself. Pei Chi took the ointment and the nurse cleaned her wound. She was afraid of pain, but she endured it and did not make a sound. No matter how painful it was, you had to endure it. No one would hug you and comfort you. Pei Chi, don't miss the past. Don't miss the warmth brought by Tang Yu. That will make you weak. She didn't leave after applying the medicine. She saw a pair of white-haired old people supporting each other. The old woman was receiving an foredrip. Perhaps she was afraid of pain. The old man was coaxing her. "Suiying, don't be afraid. It's just a little pain. If it really hurts, you can bite me and it won't hurt anymore." The old woman blushed. "Old thing, don't be impatient. Aren't you afraid that the nurse will laugh at you?" The nurse pursed her lips and smiled at the side. The old granny spoke again. "Daughter, I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but this old man has been like this all his life. Whenever I have a minor illness or pain, he will be extremely nervous. It's not like I'm a little girl anymore, yet he's still so affectionate. Even I feel embarrassed for him." Perhaps because it was rare to see such a loving couple, the nurse softened and said softly, "That's your blessing, Grandma. See, I'm the one who treats you the best in this world. If you had followed your first love, I wouldn't have treated you like this." The more he talked, the further he went. The old granny spat at him. "Aren't you afraid of making me angry?" Thus, the grandpa shut up and obediently stood by the side. From time to time, he would check if the hot water bag under the grandma's hand was hot enough. After staying up like this for an hour, the old grandma fell asleep, and so did the old grandpa. Their heads were leaning against each other, and their white hair was indescribably beautiful. Pei Chi didn't know why she didn't leave and just kept watching. She was very envious. After a long time, she gently got up and walked to the nurse's station. "Patient 34 needs a water change." The nurse woke up from her nap. She looked at Pei Chi and brought the water over. When Pei Chi walked out of the hospital, it was already 9 o'clock. She stood on the bustling street. There were people everywhere, and there were lights everywhere. But she didn't know where to go. The world was so big, but she couldn't find Tang Yu anywhere. Where was he? Was he dancing with that girl? Did he not hate her anymore? Had he already forgotten about the pain she had caused him? Was he about to forget about her? Sporadic snowflakes floated down from the sky, appearing gentle and affectionate in the winter night. The people on the street were cheering, and their voices reached her heart. Pei Chi caught the snowflake with her uninjured finger and watched as it melted in her palm. Damn Tangyu. Why didn't he want me? What's so bad about me? I'm pretty. I come from a good family. I can play the piano, and even if I'm not good at anything else, I'm very obedient. Why didn't he want me? Bastard. He can't get a wife in his life. He can only wait for Pei Chi for the rest of his life. Sun Feifei tore at the tissue paper. Tang Yu's car was completely ruined. When he got out of the car, he realized that he did not have his wallet with him. Even his cell phone was in the car. Looking at the long road, his face tensed up and he quickly walked in the direction where Pei Chi had gone. He did not know what he wanted to do. He just wanted to see her now. If he just wanted to see her, his heart might die. About 15 minutes later, he saw Pei Chi's car. But she was not there. Tang Yu frowned and looked at the car. Chapter 322. Tang Yu replied calmly. The little girl was very innocent. She tilted her head and said, "My sister cried just now, and her hand seems to be injured." Injured? Tang Yu pursed his thin lips. Also, she forgot to lock her car. The little girl stuck out her tongue and said, "Uncle, if you know my sister, can you drive her car away? It won't be good if it gets stolen." Tang Yu looked back at the car, then at the little girl and waved her over. The little girl came over and he reached out to ruffle her hair. "Chi-Chi, go home early." "Uncle, my name is not Chi-Chi." The little girl pouted. She was unhappy. Tang Yu smiled and said, "Then can Uncle say sorry?" The little girl stared at him for a while. Her friends called her from afar, so she skipped away again. Tang Yu turned around and opened the door of the white Shime. Sure enough, it opened easily. He sat in the car and smelled a familiar scent. It was Pei Chi-Chi's scent. There were a few CDs in the car, and he saw a newspaper. He couldn't be more familiar with the photo on the top. It was taken when he and Sun Feifei were dancing together. He didn't know who had captured the angle so accurately, but his eyes looked especially affectionate. Did she misunderstand? Was that why she cried? Tang Yu's face became colder. He started the car and drove quickly to Xia City. When he arrived at Xia City, he went upstairs and opened the door. The room was dark. The tightness in his body suddenly relaxed. He had forgotten that she didn't live here for a long time. Pei Chi had moved away. Tang Yu turned on the lights and saw that the inside was much quieter than before. He walked in slowly. He pulled off his bow tie and threw it aside. His body sank into the sofa. He closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. "Pei Chi, if I could forget you, I would never choose to see you again." He closed his eyes and rested for a while. Then he picked up the landline and dialed Pei Chi's number. But she turned off her phone. Tang Yu's expression was even worse. After putting down the phone, she walked out and drove her car around. In the end, he saw her in a small park not far from Xia City. It was late at night, and she was sitting alone on a bench in the park. "Isn't it cold? Aren't you afraid of danger?" Tang Yu parked the car on the side of the road and got out. When she raised her eyes to look at him, there was a momentary shock on her face. He walked straight up to her, not saying a word, just looking down at her. She raised her head and looked at him. After staring at each other for what felt like an eternity, he finally bent down slightly so that his face was level with hers. They were very, very close. So close that his lips were almost touching hers, so close that it seemed like they were kissing. Pei Chi-Chi's heartbeat quickened. She wanted to retreat, but he held her back with one hand. She believed that if she dared to move, he would kiss her lips. Her breath was in a mess. She didn't dare to look up, afraid that she would drown in his black eyes. Slowly, he said, "Why are you crying?" As he spoke, his thin lips moved back and forth on her lips like a soft brush. She didn't dare to move an inch. This was too dangerous. "No." She answered too quickly, almost shrilly. But her eyes were closed, and her eyelashes couldn't help but tremble. She looked extremely fragile. Tang Yu narrowed his eyes, and the large palm on her back moved to the back of her head. Pei Chi immediately opened her eyes. She realized what he wanted to do, but his movements were too fast. Before she could resist, their lips touched, and he kissed her. On this cold winter night, in the deserted park. Chapter 323. The night was very cold, but his lips were very hot, as though they were going to burn her. Pei Chi instinctively tried to push him away, but how could she move him with her weak strength? He had originally used one hand to press her down, but now he used two hands to hold her cheeks. He kissed her deeply, and Pei Chi felt a little uncomfortable. She clenched her fists and tried to punch him, but she couldn't stop him. He quickly caught her disobedient hand, folded it behind her back, and held it with his other hand. In this way, she was presented to him in an embarrassing position. Tang Yu panted and let go of her little mouth. He lifted his handsome face slightly and saw that her breathing was also erratic. "Why are you crying?" he asked once again. Pei Chi raised her head and didn't say a word. "Do you want me to kiss you again?" His tone was a little mocking. She finally said, "I'm not crying. Even if I'm crying, it has nothing to do with Mr. Tang." "Is that so?" He stared at her eyes, suddenly got up and left. Pei Chi heaved a sigh of relief. Then she felt a kind of emptiness and loneliness, an indescribable feeling. But Tang Yu came back very quickly, and when she looked up, she saw her car. "He drove her car here? Are you sure you didn't hurt your hand because you saw this?" He was still cold. He didn't give her any warmth because she was crying, or because her hand was hurt, nor did his heart soften because of a kiss. He placed the newspaper in front of her. As Pei Chi read it, her heart slowly calmed down. She looked up at him and pursed her lips. Then she said lightly, "I want to see my dad today, Tang Yu. I only cried because I missed him, not because of anything else. As for this newspaper, it was just a coincidence." He stared at her eyes, not letting go of any changes in her expression. Pei Chi's face remained indifferent, not letting him see through her. Slowly, his expression became even colder. He straightened his body and looked around. "I'll send you back." His gaze fell on her bandaged palm. It must have been burned by the fireworks. Pei Chi's hand shrank back, and she instinctively refused. "No, I'll go back myself. And then you might be raped by a tramp in this place, and I'll be the last person to see you. And then I won't be able to clear my name," he said, quite pitilessly. Pei Chi pursed her lips tightly. In the end, she got up and walked with him to her car. She did not ask him why he was driving her car. She did not ask him why he was looking for her, because if he asked, everything would go back to square one. She was not flattering herself, but she knew him very well. For some reason, Pei Chi felt sad for him. Originally, she felt helpless, but now, she felt that Tang Yu was hurt even more than she was. She put her fingers on the door handle and said softly, "Tang Yu, don't come looking for me anymore. You think too highly of yourself, Miss Pei." Tang Yu's face was a little tense. "I'm just doing a good deed every day." She did not argue with him, but quietly opened the door and got into the car. On the way, they did not speak. "Your address," he suddenly said. Pei Chi looked up abruptly. She stared at the headlights in front of her and whispered the address. Tang Yu did not speak. The car drove so fast that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. "Mr. Tang, slow down." Her voice was a little hoarse. Tang Yu pursed his lips and slowed down the car, but he still said mockingly, "I thought you would want to get rid of me as soon as possible." She cleverly did not reply. Chapter 324. The car stopped, but he didn't move. She didn't dare to move either. "Thank you for sending me back." She lowered her eyes. Tang Yu's fingers were still on the steering wheel. He was silent for a long time before he said, "Can you still drive with one hand?" "Huh." Pei Chi was a little surprised. Tang Yu's voice was still cold. "I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet." After saying that, the atmosphere in the car became a little strange. Pei Chi tilted her head and looked at him for a long time before she nodded. She opened the door and got out of the car. Tang Yu followed her. This was a moderately old building. She lived on the 6th floor. After getting out of the elevator, she held the key for a long time but couldn't take it out. Finally, Tang Yu opened the door for her. The house was very clean, like the place she lived in. Tang Yu looked around and asked her lightly, "Where's the bathroom?" "In the inner room of the room." She was supposed to bring him there, but thinking about their current relationship, it wasn't suitable for them to stay in the same room. Moreover, he had a girlfriend. Pei Chi pursed her lips. "If you want to use it, it's easy to find it. I'll go downstairs." He watched her walk to the kitchen before he slowly walked to her room. Just as he thought, the bedroom was clean and tidy. It was the way she liked it. There was a pillow on the bed, just like the one in Xia City. He looked in Pei Chi's direction and suddenly walked over. He picked up the pillow, opened the pillowcase and sniffed it. He smelled a faint scent of cologne. It was the brand he usually used. In other words, this pillow had been used by him, and Pei Chi had taken it away. She didn't take anything but a pillow, and it was his. How could he believe that she didn't love or like him at all? Tang Yu narrowed his eyes and put down the pillow without batting an eyelid. Then, he went to the bathroom to relieve himself. After washing his hands, he walked straight into the kitchen and watched her down there. "It's not convenient for my hands, so I can only make it simple," she said softly, not looking at him. She probably heard his footsteps and knew that he was there. She made a simple egg noodle soup. Now that it was almost ready, she turned off the fire and filled a bowl. "Let me carry them." Tang Yu reached out and placed the 2 bowls on the small dining table. Naturally, this place couldn't be compared to the rose garden he lived in. It was the difference between heaven and earth compared to Xia City. But it was clean and tidy, and it had a different kind of warmth. Pei Chi sat down and glanced at Tang Yu before lowering her head to eat her noodles. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had never imagined that one day she would be able to have a meal with Tang Yu. Moreover, she made it herself. Tang Yu ate very quickly. Chapter 325. It's inconvenient, isn't it? He looked at her deeply. "I don't have a cell phone, and I don't have any money with me. You want me to walk back?" Her heart was beating a little fast. "I have change here." She wanted to get up, but he held her down. His eyes were locked on her. "Do you want me to leave so badly?" Pei Chi was a little stunned. She looked at him and was speechless. Her hand was still held by him. After a long while, he suddenly said, "It's snowing outside. I'll stay here for the night and leave tomorrow." She uttered a weak, "No. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you." He said indifferently, "I have something important to do tomorrow morning. Also, Miss Pei, you seem to have forgotten that I have a girlfriend." Pei Chi really wanted to scold him. "If your sense of morality is so strong, then why do you still want to eat the noodles I cooked?" "It's not the noodles. Some children will think too much just because of the sentence, 'Let me eat the noodles tonight.' Actually, the author really didn't mean it that way. It's just the noodles." But since he said that, she couldn't reject him. It seemed that she had something to hide if she rejected him. Her small red lips moved. "There's a small guest room here. You can make do with it for the night." Tang Yu smiled faintly, looking very dignified. But after a while, Pei Chi regretted it. She was used to living alone, so she didn't lock the door when she washed her body in the bathroom. Tang Yu took a clean towel into the bathroom, while Pei Chi was outside the bathroom. Her pajamas were half taken off, and she was wiping herself with the towel. She looked so much more seductive than not wearing any clothes. Tang Yu was only wearing a shirt and trousers. He looked at her quietly for a while before he started to unbutton his shirt. Pei Chi covered her body with her hands, and her voice was a little shaky. "Tang Yu, what are you doing?" "Taking a shower," he said very naturally, his voice cold and hoarse. Pei Chi pursed her lips. "Get out." Tang Yu looked at her and went out. However, when he reached the bedroom, he quickly took off his clothes and threw them on her bed one by one, especially the black bullet top. When he opened the bathroom door again, Pei Chi was about to cry. Did he know what this meant? They were separated. How could this be? She could not care less about cleaning herself. She covered her body with one hand and squeezed herself out of the room. However, Pei Chi was still too naive. She sat on the bed, waiting for him to leave her bedroom. Tang Yu came out after showering for 10 minutes. When he came out, he only had a small towel wrapped around his waist. It was so small, it looked like it was going to fall off. It couldn't cover anything at all. She lowered her face and pretended not to see it, but her face was a little hot. Just now, when she saw his long and slender legs, her entire body felt weak, as if something had broken out of a cocoon. Tang Yu looked at her indifferently. "Do you have a hairdryer?" She suddenly looked up and saw his back. Her bedroom was really too small, and it seemed a little cramped for him to be here. His presence was too strong, as if he was everywhere. Moreover, he was only wrapped in a small towel. "I'll get it." She got off the bed carefully, walked to a small cabinet, and squatted down to get it. Chapter 326. Pei Chi accidentally bumped into the area where he was wrapped in the towel. What was even more unfortunate was that the towel had loosened. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Pei Chi raised her little face and looked at him with a pitiful expression. Tang Yu's eyes were deep and bottomless as he looked down at her. He pinched her chin and moved to the side so that she wouldn't see him in such a sorry state. "You can't wait to throw yourself into my arms?" He took the hairdryer from her hand, calmly bent down to pick up the towel, wrapped it around his body, and casually dried his hair. Pei Chi stood there and didn't even know that her feet were numb. Just now when she saw him, she was excited. She shook her head and didn't dare to think about it anymore. She was afraid that if she continued to think about it, she wouldn't be able to control herself and would throw herself at him. Tang Yu quickly finished drying his hair, put down his things, and walked out. After he left, Pei Chi couldn't fall asleep. Her hand didn't hurt too much, but with him around, she always felt uneasy. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she would suddenly wake up when she felt sleepy. She would always feel that someone had suddenly entered the room. After staying up like this for half the night, she finally couldn't sleep anymore. She quietly got up and wanted to go to the balcony outside to see how the snow was falling. She had just opened the door to the room when she was choked by the smoke outside. She instinctively wanted to retreat to her bedroom, to return to that safe little world, but her waist was quickly grabbed by someone, and then she was pressed against the door, firmly pressed. He had a burning masculine scent on his body, and it affected her domineeringly. "Tang Yu." Her voice was extremely weak, and her body struggled slightly. However, her weak strength was no different from a kitten in front of him. Instead, he suppressed her even more forcefully. She could only look at him helplessly. Her watery eyes seemed to be soaked in a layer of water in the dark. "Don't call me Mr. Tang anymore?" He bent down to look at her, and before she could react, he kissed her little mouth. She awkwardly turned away, but he held her little head with one hand and held her in place. Mixed with the scent of tobacco and masculinity, he invaded her domineeringly. As the kiss deepened, his large palm moved downwards without hesitation. "Don't!" Pei Chi let out a broken voice. She pushed him with her injured hand. Even though it was very painful, she still pushed him. She could not have sex with him again. Tang Yu stopped abruptly, his deep eyes staring at her. "You don't want it?" His large palms were teasing her cruelly, and his dark eyes were cold as he watched her struggle, pain, and despair from the torture. Pei Chi's forehead was dripping with sweat. Her head drooped to one side, desperately trying not to make a weak sound. "Even so, you don't want it?" He approached her, a small flame burning in his eyes, enough to ignite her. "No, no, no." She shook her head desperately, almost crying. She had known about love affairs for a long time. This kind of thing, or it could be said that once Yu Wang's gate was opened, it would be difficult to close it again. It was fine if he was alone, but now that he was teasing her like this, she couldn't take it at all. She almost went limp on his palm, and she was in a sorry state. Tang Yu leaned close to her ear, and his voice was low and hoarse. "Is that so?" Then what is this? Pei Chi closed her eyes immediately, refusing to look. You don't dare to look? You don't dare to admit that you want me? He bit her little ear, grabbed her hand, and tortured her even more. Chapter 327. Pei Chi finally burst into tears. With one hand hanging around his neck, she moved her lips to his with misty eyes, as though she was begging to kiss him. Tang Yu's dark eyes looked at her quietly, and all his movements stopped. Then, he let go of her and smiled faintly. Miss Pei, I think you've misunderstood. Her eyes narrowed, but he was still smiling. He said nonchalantly, I have a girlfriend. He took 2 steps back and admired the way she looked at that moment. Pei Chi clutched her pajamas tightly to cover her body. She glared at him. You jerk. Whatever you say. His expression turned a little cold. Pei Chi, I've said it before. I won't wait for you in the same place forever. He even said to her a little cruelly, Fei is more obedient and sensible than you are. As he said that, his dark eyes stared into her eyes, not letting go of any slight change in her. Pei Chi's body was warm, but her heart was cold. She leaned against the door tightly and stared at him. Slowly, her lips curled into a small smile. Then I'll have to congratulate you. After saying that, she felt indescribably tired. She loosened her fingers, opened the door, and walked into her bedroom. The door closed. She leaned against the door and closed her eyes. She couldn't help but cry. Tang Yu was too despicable. She sobbed softly. Then, she squatted down and hugged herself with one hand. She had said that she wouldn't cry anymore, but she couldn't help but cry when he treated her like this. Pei Chi thought that perhaps she should leave this city. She couldn't stand seeing Tang Yu and Sun Fei after they got married. She would go crazy. She had previously planned to move the Pei Corporation's headquarters away and sell that piece of land. It wasn't a bad thing for the Pei Corporation, and it would give them more liquidity, although this wasn't what she wanted. Now, she admitted that she was a coward and that she was running away. He was too powerful. She couldn't defend against him. Outside the door, Tang Yu was only wearing a white shirt and trousers. Just now, it was a lie to say that he didn't want her. He wanted her so much that he was crazy, but he wasn't a man who couldn't control his lower body. He wanted her, but before she was honest with him, he would never touch her. He had his pride. Tang Yu pursed his lips tightly and returned to the small guest room. The place was very small, so he made do with lying down for the night. He left early the next morning and used her phone to call Meng Qingqing. Downstairs, Meng Qingqing watched as Tang Yu walked down the stairs. He looked around again and thought of Tang Yu's absence last night. He smiled and said, Don't tell me that Sun Fei lives here. As he spoke, he handed a cell phone to Tang Yu. You left it in the car. By the way, I have bad news for you. Your car probably needs a thorough cleaning. I heard from the driver that Miss Sun did a lot of indecent things in the car. You don't want to know. Scrap the car. Tang Yu opened the car door and got in. It wasn't because Sun Fei did anything to the car, but because he had sat with Sun Fei and Pei Chi had seen it. Meng Qingqing smiled. That's such a waste. He glanced upstairs again. Actually, he didn't need to think to know who lived here. There was no one else but Pei Chi. Chapter 328. Meng Qingqing smiled and said, You've fallen into her trap. Tang Yu didn't say anything. He just smiled and said, Let's go back to the rose garden and change. The car turned and went to the rose garden. At 10 in the morning, Meng Qingqing walked into Tang Yu's office with a printed list of phone numbers in his hand. He put it in front of Tang Yu and sat down opposite him. I've asked around. The day before the engagement, Pei Chi was alone and asked the bodyguards not to follow him. He must have gone to meet someone. There's a number on the phone, and it matches the time. It should be the person who met Pei Chi. Tang Yu held the piece of paper and looked at it. Meng Qingqing pointed at the number. It's here. Look. Tang Yu picked up his phone and dialed the number, but there was a voice message. Sorry, the number you dialed is not in service. Please check before dialing. Meng Qingqing also heard it and said calmly, "It seems like this person consciously used a smurf to contact Pei Xiaoqi." Tang Yu knew that too. He thought for a while and said, "Are there any other clues?" "I don't think so. I think we should follow it. Maybe we can find something else." Meng Qingqing shook his head and suggested. Tang Yu's slender fingers fiddled with his phone. "After a while," he said calmly, "get someone to monitor her phone. Also, get someone to watch her. Report to me if anything unusual happens." Meng Qingqing shrugged and smiled. "Are you sure? What about Sun Feifei? Who will be the big one? But I don't think Pei Qiqi will be willing." Tang Yu glared at him fiercely. "Okay, pretend I didn't say anything." Meng Qingqing raised his hand and suddenly sighed. Pei Xiaoqi has been burning incense for several lifetimes. Tang Yu's voice was deep. "Don't alarm her." Meng Qingqing chuckled softly. "I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to hold it in. Last night, you slept at her place. How could you hold it in?" He hadn't had sex for a few months. A little lamb was right in front of his mouth. How could he not eat it? Tang Yu ignored him and flipped open the document. "All right, you can leave now." After Meng Qingqing left, he put down the pen in his hand and let out a long sigh. Indeed, he probably had internal injuries, however. Before Tang Yu could find anything, he received news that the Pei Group was preparing to move. As for that piece of land, it was bought by Pei Mingyi many years ago. Now, it had risen to a few billion yuan, and it was the most valuable thing in the Pei Group. Tang Yu knew very well who she was leaving to avoid. "Little liar. You said you didn't want it that night." It was clearly not the end of the world. However, he still approved of her doing this. Pei Qiqi actually had some business acumen. Xiao Ran stood in front of Tang Yu, not daring to make a sound. In the past few months, the CEO had been in a bad mood, and the employees of Sheng Yuan hadn't been having a good time either. It was supposed to be the off-season at the end of the year, but they had managed to achieve results in the peak season. However, this didn't make the CEO smile. His expression became colder and colder. Although he was still handsome, she still missed the approachable CEO. "Where is the Pei Group going to move?" Tang Yu squeezed the invitation, his voice tense. Xiao Ran answered quickly. "In the VIP lounge of the Pearl Hotel." Chapter 329. Xiao Ran thought in his heart, "It's so lively." Tang Yu looked at the time. It was the 5th day of the first lunar month. She couldn't wait. "Tell the organizer that I'll be there," Tang Yu said lightly. Xiao Ran wasn't surprised, but he felt pity for Sun Feifei. She had already taken half a step into the Tang family and might have to take it back. After Xiao Ran left, Tang Yu sat quietly. The phone on the table rang. He picked it up. It was the second secretary's voice. "President, Miss Sun is looking for you. Should I put her through?" Tang Yu was stunned for a moment before he remembered that it was Sun Feifei. She would have a concert at Sound Nest on New Year's Eve. Sheng Yuan was the investor and had invested 100 million yuan. He still needed to cooperate with Sun Feifei while maintaining this superficial relationship with her. Of course, more importantly, he wanted her to cooperate with him. "Put her through," Tang Yu said lightly, then pulled his tie and waited. After a while, Sun Feifei said, "Tang Yu, I'm reminding you that my concert is the day after tomorrow. As my boyfriend, don't forget." He let out a faint "in" sound, extremely cold and indifferent. Sun Feifei didn't know why she used to be so infatuated with him. He was clearly a man without a heart. "Also, my parents asked if you would like to have a reunion dinner with us after the concert." She admitted that she was making things difficult for him. Tang Yu's voice was deep. "I think from the day we work together, we have to at least make sure that the other party won't be the one holding us back. If you need me to solve such a simple problem for you, then I don't mind changing teammates." Sun Feifei knew that he was calling her a pig-like teammate. She was furious, but she couldn't show it, because the conditions he had given her were very tempting. She wanted to be famous and needed a strong backer in the music industry. She wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to soar to the top. "Okay, I'll explain to them myself," she said in a low voice. Then, Tang Yu hung up. Sun Feifei really wanted to scold someone, but there was no one to scold. She was really sure that Tang Yu did not have any feelings for her. Otherwise, a man could not be so cold. Tang Yu hung up the phone and made another call to Meng Qingqing. Cooperate with Sun Feifei's agent and report the concert to all the major media outlets. Meng Qingqing knew him best. Of course, he knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, I will definitely let Pei Xiaoqi see how much you love Sun Feifei. Wasn't it easy to make a woman jealous? Throwing money like crazy to another woman. Therefore, within a day, the road signs, billboards, and electronic screens in B City were filled with the news of the concert held by Soundnest. Furthermore, the title of the main character was The Future Wife of Xingyuan CEO. Chapter 330. After confirming the venue, she came out. There were a few temporary workers handing out flyers at the entrance. Seeing Pei Qiqi coming over, they immediately came up to her enthusiastically. Miss, this is our Miss Sun Feifei's concert at Soundnest. You must go and listen. Miss Sun Feifei is the youngest pianist in the country, and this concert was created by Mr. Tang from Shengyuan for her. There may be some mysterious interaction. Of course, there will be a live broadcast on the big screen of Shengyuan building. Pei Qiqi didn't reach out to take it. She just put on her sunglasses indifferently and walked towards her car. However, no matter where she went today, there were people handing out flyers and forcing those flyers with Tang Yu and Sun Feifei's names into her hands. There were about 10 flyers stuffed in her car. Sitting down, Pei Qiqi took the piece of paper and looked at it. Then, he smiled bitterly. He used to dote on her like this, and now, he also doted on others like this. She thought back to that night. She thought about how he had stopped abruptly. He had said that he had a girlfriend. Yes, he had a girlfriend. She could tell that Sun Feifei was a good person. She was very suitable for him. Pei Qiqi started the car expressionlessly. Tang Yu, I won't cry, I won't cry. This city made her feel suffocated. She couldn't breathe because he was everywhere. For the first time, Pei Qiqi felt that auctioning the land was a wise choice. It was New Year's Eve. With Shang Yuan's actions, even though the sound nest had only been built for a few days, the seats for a few thousand people were all filled. All the major media outlets were scrambling to report, and the spotlights of B City were shining brightly. Sun Feifei stood beside Tang Yu amidst the dazzling lights. She felt that although Tang Yu wasn't a good person, his money was a good thing. She had played the piano for so long, but she had never been so glamorous. She smiled sweetly. After thinking for a while, she wrapped her arms around Tang Yu's. Tang Yu narrowed his eyes, but he didn't push her away. Instead, he smiled at the cameras. All of this was accurately transmitted to the live stream in front of Shengyuan Tower. On New Year's Eve, there was no one in front of the building except for Pei Qiqi, who was wearing a thick coat. She sat in the square, hugging herself as she watched him stand with another woman. She stared at his face. Actually, Tang Yu, this way. We can stay up together and celebrate the new year together. She allowed herself one last indulgence, just one last time. To look at him like this. Pei Qiqi closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she only saw Sun Feifei sitting in front of the piano, quietly playing, and Tang Yu was nowhere to be seen. There would be a mysterious interaction later on. Pei Qiqi smiled as she picked up a can of beer and poured it into her mouth. She wasn't used to drinking, so she choked on the wine and started tearing up. That feeling was the same as smoking for the first time. However, ever since Tang Yu had spanked her little but that time, she had never spanked him again. Pei Qiqi smiled and finished the can of beer in a short while. She had brought 6 bottles with her. I haven't congratulated you yet. She smiled foolishly at the screen. The moonlight shone on her, making her look exceptionally lonely. She loved him so much that her heart ached. The more she loved him, the more she didn't dare to be with him. Tang Yu, I often think that if I loved you less, would I have the courage to be with you? To hell with the guilt. To hell with the things that happened in our previous lives. We are who we are. Why should we pay for other people's actions? She muttered and shook her head. No, I can't do it when the person who gave birth to me hurt your mother like that. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.